Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the East Brandywine Township Board of Supervisors work session for Thursday, February 7th, 2018. Just a reminder, recording device will be used during this meeting. I'm going to let everybody know one of our supervisors couldn't be here today in person, but he is here via telephone. So I'm going to turn it over to the Township Solicitor for an ordinance amending Chapter 399.
Thank you. So this is a proposed ordinance to amend the Township zoning ordinance, which is codified in Chapter 399 of the East Brandywine Code. It's specific to the area and bulk standards related to an age-qualified residential community. Because it's a zoning ordinance, there are certain procedural requirements the board has to adhere to before it can adopt an ordinance. So the first is we have to advertise this as a public hearing. We did that in the Daily Local News on January 23rd and January 30th, 2019. And I do have a proof of publication that proves that. The second thing that I need to do, because I only advertise a summary of the ordinance, I have to send a copy of the ordinance for public inspection to both the Chester County Law Library as well as the Daily Local, and I did that with a cover letter on January 22nd, 2019. We also have to send a copy of the ordinance to the Chester County Planning Commission for their review. We did that, and the County Planning Commission sent a letter back to Mr. Pearsall dated January 9th, 2019. They didn't have any comments other than to say that the proposed amendment is appropriate. And the final step is that your own Planning Commission has to review the ordinance. They've looked at it a couple times, and I believe they made a recommendation last evening to support the board adopting the ordinance. I can't remember when we adopted. I think in December you adopted an ordinance creating a new overlay district called the Age Qualified Residential District. The Applicants Council, NB Homes, is here, Lindsay Dunn. After the ordinance was adopted, they realized that they wanted front porches to go a little bit further into the setback, and so they proposed this amendment. As typical, when we do one amendment, we realize there's some other things that could be tweaked. So we just sort of cleaned up the area and bulk standards for this specific type of development. I don't know, Ms. Dunn, if you have anything to add.
Nothing to add other than the fact that just to, for the record, the Planning Commission recommended the adoption of the ordinance in December, I believe. Last night we got conditional use.
Yeah, the minutes from the December meeting, I don't think reflected that, so that's
Okay.
at least, maybe I was looking at the January minutes, but I just want to make sure that it had been done.
Correct.
So, okay.
Yes.
Happy to answer any questions anyone has.
As are we.
I'm familiar with it because it also went through the ordinance task force, so
Right.
I have no questions.
And I believe Mr. Winters is also familiar with it through the ordinance task force, but Mr. Scribner, if you have any questions.
I'm good.
Okay, we can close the hearing, and it would be appropriate for somebody to make a motion.
Did you want to ask for public comment?
Oh,
Just in,
yeah, that's probably a good idea. Anybody in the audience who's not the applicant have any comments? Seeing none?
all right, I'll make a motion, we adopt ordinance 01 of 2019.
I will second. All in favor?
Aye.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Ms. Dunn.
All right, public comment for non-agenda items. Reminder, rules for conduct of a public meeting established by Resolution 2001-08. The time allotted to each individual making a comment shall be 3 minutes unless otherwise set by the presiding officer. Additional public comment may be granted at the discretion of the presiding officer at the conclusion of the meeting. Any public comment for non-agenda items? Seeing none, we will move on to the minutes of the previous meeting. Board of Supervisors, January 17, 2019.
Make a motion that they be adopted as submitted.
I will second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Minutes of the previous meeting for the Planning Commission, January 2nd, 2019.
I'll make a motion that they be, well, you know what, these, we just have to redate them. The date on the written one says 18.
Well, thank you.
But other than that, with that, I'll make a motion that we approve the Planning Commission meetings of January 2nd, 2019.
Okay, with the change to January 18th, I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Old business.
Aye.
Old business, Pulte, East Brandywine, Route 322, and Bollinger Road, traffic improvements, highway occupancy permits. Kristen.
Okay, so as part of the Applecross development, Pulte is required to complete intersection improvements at Bollinger Road and Route 322. They were, after they obtained land development approval, and after the homeowner's declaration had been recorded and provided to the lot owners that live in that development, they, in order to get their highway occupancy permit from PennDOT, they recognized that they needed to install stormwater management facilities within the PennDOT right-of-way. PennDOT has taken on, a couple years ago, took on a new position in a, they call it a strikeout letter, which is sort of a policy statement of PennDOT, that they will not maintain stormwater facilities within their own state roads. And they require the township to be a co-permittee on HOP applications when new developments come in. The way that municipalities have handled this, including East Brandywine, is that you enter an agreement with the developer so that you say, fine, we'll be the co-permittee on the HOP application, but we're going to, the future ongoing maintenance obligations, we're going to transfer to the declarant, the developer. In this case, it would ultimately then go to the homeowners association. Because of the timing of this, Pulte was unable to go back to their homeowners association. I guess they could try it, but it would be very difficult for them to put that legal burden on the homeowners association because those lot owners bought their lots without that obligation. Pulte came back and said, we really aren't going to be able to do that. So township, do you want these road improvements? And, if you do, we need to get this HOP for the stormwater. We had a conversation about this probably October, November, and at the time, the board discussed, well, what would be, let's talk to Pannoni, let's figure out what the ongoing maintenance obligations would be, what does that expense look like? I sent to you yesterday an email from Nate Klein, who had taken a look at it. He explained that what he would say would be 10% of the installation cost is about a good guess for what the maintenance cost would be on an annual basis. So you're looking at 3 inlets, a manhole, and 689 linear feet of an 18-inch stormwater pipe. His expectation or anticipation is that maintenance cost on an annual basis would be around $9,700. And that's what he's suggesting would be something that the board, if you were going to ask Pulte to do anything, would make a contribution in that regard. I have had conversations with Ms. Zarro, who is here on behalf of Pulte, and I think Pulte's pushing back a little bit in that in the settlement agreement that was negotiated for the Pulte development there had been a $750,000 contribution to the township. It was unrestricted in terms of how the township was going to use that. And Scott, I don't know if you can speak to where that money is and what the anticipated proposed use of that funds is, but I think Pulte's response was, as far as the overall development, they feel that they've made sufficient contributions to the township and believe that this intersection improvement is something that the township wanted, obviously PennDOT wants, and to move it forward, we need to, let these stormwater facilities be constructed. So I'm here to you to say that, the typical process that the township has taken with respect to shifting the maintenance obligations, we can still do that for future developments if we do it at the outset. Before the homeowner's declaration gets recorded, we have to make sure that that's included. Here, we're in a little bit of a, situation where because these facilities came after the fact, we really can't go back to the HOA and ask them to take on that obligation. So the board's decision is, do you want to make a request to Pulte to contribute anything, or are you satisfied that the monies that they have contributed based on the settlement agreement is sufficient, and you're still willing to serve or act as the permittee on these facilities?
And I guess I was the only one around when all this transpired, that the money in the settlement agreement, except for HUD, the money in the settlement agreement had nothing to do with this intersection improvements, and it's my recollection that Pulte agreed to handle this intersection improvement, and to me, that would include the maintenance of this, and I think I'm not 100% happy with Nate's proposed solution, which is basically to pay a one-time fee and then we absorb all the maintenance responsibilities. But I would agree to do that to move this thing along because I think it's important that it be done.
I would agree with you. I think I think we are pressured here with our back against the wall. I'm not happy with it either, but so I'll second that.
So I guess Allison's here. Do you believe that Pulte would be willing to pay this? It's in Nate's recommendation, it was $9,700 $9,779, which is fairly nominal considering the scope of the project.
Unfortunately, my client was supposed to be here. He's stuck in traffic, so I don't have him right at this moment, but he should be here any minute. I mean, this particular road improvement was supposed to be more global. There's supposed to be a proportionate share paid by the Weaver Tract for this improvement. And it's also supposed to be coordinated with the Mapleview improvements that are going in now. So I don't know that Pulte would necessarily be willing to shoulder the entire burden, considering that the Weaver Tract is supposed to contribute monetarily to this improvement when it's put in. So certainly if Pulte did make this contribution up front, I think we would be looking for the Weaver Tract to contribute its proportionate share for that cost as well. That is in the settlement agreement.
Yeah, and the only thing I'm going to say about that, Allison, is that when the settlement agreement was
Yeah.
done, Mapleview wasn't
Oh, yeah, I'm not talking
anywhere on
about
the radar
Mapleview.
screen.
Yeah, no, I
And
understand that.
I'm not even sure that Kay Hovnanian we were far enough along with them that they had any agreement, they were not part of the agreement to make these intersection improvements. It's my recollection that that was solely Pulte's responsibility, and as these other projects came along, it may have changed the scope of the improvements. Mapleview's are primarily on the other side of the road, but I have no objection if Mapleview and NVR wants to contribute to it, but I think if you want to move this, I think this thing is drug on way too long. I will admit that we made a mistake not having a deadline on Pulte to do this, which we should have, but I think they've been, quite honestly, dragging their feet, hoping that these other projects would come to fruition earlier so that they could share this responsibility. And I recognize that there's a certain logic to that because the scope of their project was more limited than what we now need to have done, so.
I mean, I agree, Mapleview was not on the radar. That I was mentioning more from a coordination standpoint, that Pulte would like to do the improvement in the spring in coordination with Maplebrook. I think, my understanding is the improvements now work together. However, and I agree with you, I don't know the genesis because I know you were around and Lou was handling this and I wasn't at the time, but the settlement agreement and originally in 2004 and then as amended later in 2004, specifically said that the Weaver Tract, the township will require any developer of the Weaver Tract or any portion thereof to remit to Pulte its proportionate share of the cost of those intersection improvements, and that's referring to the intersection of Follinger Road and 322, and any modification otherwise required by PennDOT in connection with the referenced improvement based upon the daily trips generated by each respective development. So, I mean, to me, this is part of the cost of that intersection improvement, so I think that we would, if the Weaver Tract is required to give a proportionate share, that this be considered as part of it.
And if you, my interpretation of the language you just
Yeah.
read was that it was clear to us at the time that Pulte was going to do this, they were going to pay for it, and then when Weaver Tract came around, there would be some reimbursement.
Reimbursement,
Which
yeah.
to me still means you do it.
Yeah, and I agree. Pulte-
Reimbursement to Pulte
Yes.
from the
Yes,
township?
yeah,
Okay.
there's
No,
a
not from
whole.
the township, from
It
the
goes
Weaver Tract.
directly-
Right,
it
we
goes
would
directly
collect
to
it and then
Pulte.
pay it back to
Yeah.
Pulte. So is there any reason why, and again, we haven't gotten to that conditional use hearing though, that if we take that condition that she just read and then impose it as a condition in the Weaver Tract agreement, this money can be included? Because I agree, it's part and parcel to the intersection improvements.
I have no problem with that. My concern is that I don't want to be in a situation where Pulte's saying, well, we'll wait and see what happens on NVR, and then
Understood.
we'll move forward.
No, the reason I'm here today is because Pulte is ready to start the road improvement
Okay.
and wants to do it in conjunction with Mapleview. So Bob Harmley is here now from Pulte.
Morning.
What we were discussing is that the engineer did take a look at the cost of the improvements and the long-term improvements, and he said that he would consider 10% of that to be reasonable, and so the township is asking, since we can't do the long-term maintenance agreement with the HOA, the township is asking for a contribution of, is it
$9,779.
$9,779. I did speak to Jamie Coach from McMahon yesterday, our engineer, about what he thought the cost of the improvements would be, and so that comes out to essentially a similar percentage. I mean, I don't dispute the cost at all. So what I was discussing with them is, there, in the settlement agreement, it does talk about that the Weaver Tract is supposed to contribute a proportionate share at the time that comes online, and I would want this cost to be included in that reimbursement if Pulte is willing to make the payment in order to move the permit forward.
Yes.
Are you okay with that? Okay. So we're okay then.
So then the only other thing, Matt, how do you feel about this? Because this is going to be on your head for the maintenance.
Well, the initial maintenance should be practically zero, but further down the line, and I know that's what this is intended to, you know, further down the line, if there's problems, which, you know, there probably will be problems at some point, and that, I believe that this should cover most of those expenses.
And lastly, I guess, in terms of, we don't have a crystal ball, but can we set a timeline? In other words, if there's problems within a year or two, that doesn't include the, you know what I mean?
Well, how does that work?
Yeah,
Let me-
PennDOT, we do have to post financial
bonds,
security
yeah.
with PennDOT, and it will be bonded, and then when you're done the improvement, they do have a two-year
Maintenance
maintenance
period,
period.
yeah.
So that'll be
Is it 2
2
years?
years.
And that's a
It'll-
PennDOT.
And that's PennDOT, so that'll be covered
Yeah.
for
So-
2 years.
Essentially, they're insuring it
No,
for
I
2 years.
understand, but Apple Cross right now is 10 years down the road and is having major problems with its stormwater basins right now. So my concern is, again, do we safety net ourselves an additional year on top of the PennDOT one, and then the $9,000 takes into effect? Because then there's some risk on our end for the initial short term.
I mean, let me put it this way, if this was a township road improvement, you'd be entitled to 18 months.
Yeah.
PennDOT actually has a longer maintenance period, so.
Could we do
think
this,
that-
Allison? Because
yeah.
I'm not sure whether or not anybody from the
Yeah.
township does an inspection because it is a PennDOT road.
That's
Would it be
correct.
okay if we had Pannoni doing an inspection upon completion, just to, so that there's a level of comfort that it's built per plan, that he doesn't see any issues with how it was constructed?
The stormwater facilities
Yeah.
themselves?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if that's something he would normally do if it was in a township road.
Yeah, if it was in a township road, that would be done.
I mean, does PennDOT do that? I'm not familiar enough with, does PennDOT have inspectors out there doing
Kristen, I
that?
believe they do.
Yeah, they do.
Okay.
I can ask Ken Kavanaugh, who is their inspector for this area, whether it's he that does that. He
Yeah.
generally does roads. I'm not sure if he would do the
see-
stormwater facilities, but there's
Or
somebody.
even just share the reports that are provided
Oh,
from the
yeah.
PennDOT inspector.
That's
See,
fine.
then, PennDOT has no skin in the game. They just basically,
Well, they do in that they,
Do.
I mean, they have it's their permit, it's their, like she said, there's a two-year period. So they, before they release that, they make sure that, I would think they do the same thing the township does. They go out and inspect it during that 2-year time frame to see if there has been any failure. And if they do, then they go back to the applicant and say, fix it before the 2 years expires.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, PennDOT in 2012 decided that it would push the maintenance responsibility for these stormwater facilities off on the municipalities. I mean, it's a completely unfunded mandate, and I think both developers and municipalities at the time were universally not happy with PennDOT's policy, and I've been involved in other projects where the municipalities contacted Harrisburg and said, you know, you can't do this to us, this isn't right, and unfortunately, that did
nowhere.
not win the day, so, and given that this project has gone on for so long, we're kind of in this, you know, in this interim zone, but, I mean, PennDOT, it's still a PennDOT road at the end of the day, they're not gonna want a failure in their roadway.
Jason, you have anything?
No, I mean, you guys kind of touched on everything. So I think it should be, the settlement did say, in my opinion, that, you know, that if the Weaver track was going to go ahead and be developed at some time, then I think this cost should be shared.
Definitely incorporate that into approval, you know, if there is an approval for that project, we can incorporate that as a condition.
Yes, yes, I mean, you guys touched on that, so.
Okay.
I'm okay with it as long as Matt is.
I think it's
So
fine.
Jay, had you made a motion and Kyle seconded it and we opened it up? I can't remember if you had actually made a motion.
No, I
or
did not make a motion.
Okay.
All right, I'll make a motion that, with respect to the Bollinger Road intersection improvements, that we accept the sum of $9,779 toward the ongoing maintenance cost of the proposed improvements.
All second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for,
Also,
But should we coordinate with Scott to,
I was
there's
just
an
gonna-
actual form that has to be signed by the
the
municipality.
M9,
Yeah.
955A, I believe,
Yeah, actually
needs to
have.
be signed, to be sent to PennDOT, so I just asked the board's authorization to do that as well.
So moved.
second, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
thanks for
you.
coming. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Allison.
Okay, Kristen, I'm going to turn it back over to you again for 888 Horseshoe Pike complaint.
Thank you.
ratification.
So this is something that we talked previously about. It is a litigation matter. It started out as a zoning enforcement. Jeff Cantlin and Frank Newhams had brought to our attention that the property at 888 Horseshoe Pike has many recreational vehicles that are being used as dwellings. There's also unsafe sanitary conditions with respect to sewer pipes being connected into a septic system. There's above-ground electrical, I guess, wires running from these different trailers. Your ordinance does call a recreational vehicle that's being used as a dwelling. They do classify that as a mobile home. So technically speaking, the mobile home regulations in your zoning ordinance would apply. That's what was cited in the notice of violation that was issued. The property owner did not appeal that notice of violation to the zoning hearing board. We then, after 30 days, filed a complaint with the district court. The defendant did not appear at the trial, and therefore we received a default judgment in the amount of $12,000. That judgment is attached to the property. There's really been no abatement of any of the issues. There's been no dialogue with the property owners, and my recommendation was that we take the next step that the municipality's planning code permits in terms of zoning enforcement, and that is to file a complaint in the Court of Common Pleas seeking an order to restrain continued violation of the ordinance. We've prepared a complaint, we've actually filed the complaint, and I'm just asking the board to ratify that we had the authority to do that. And the second part of that is, because typically when you file a complaint, this would be something that goes before a judge. It's not going to a jury because this is a matter of civil fines and also a equitable order asking for, basically telling a property owner they cannot continue to violate your ordinance. Mr. Fisher had recommended that we, in addition, file a petition for a preliminary injunction, which under the rules of civil procedure will get us to a hearing much quicker. We're working on that petition now. We have a very good draft. Scott Pearsall had been in communication with Mark Haber from the Chester County Health Department, and they, with the assistance of the police, went out and did some inspections of the property. We're going to add additional allegations to the petition with respect to the sewage situation there, which is really a public health safety concern. So I just wanted to bring it to the board to make sure there was a proper motion made to authorize us to continue on this path of trying to get compliance with the ordinance by filing both the complaint and the petition for preliminary injunction in the Court of Common Pleas.
So moved.
I second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Okay, Assistant Manager Luke for the Tracer.
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Last we discussed this item was during our budget process and meeting the regular session in November. This is a budgeted purchase, but before staff goes ahead and executes the contract for this product, I wanted to run it by the board one more time to make sure that you are aware of what we were purchasing and for what reason. Before you are some marketing materials and a proposal from Tracer. This is a product by McMahon Engineering, and it is a cloud-based GIS asset management system and also a permit tracking and work order tracking system. So our most immediate need is we have an inspection scheduling system and an inspection workflow system that is not meeting our needs. For a small municipality, we have a very high volume of building permits. And we don't have a system that produces proper reporting for us or allows us to track inspections or schedule inspections in a way that can be accessed from any device with access to the internet. So that's our most immediate need. This particular solution has some new additions that we don't currently have that I think would be an asset. Chief among them is public access to selected layers of GIS data that are local property. Currently, Chester County has a product called Chesco Views, which is a wonderful product. It shows parcels and roads and owners of parcels, but it doesn't have any layers of data that are collected at the local level. For example, there's no interactive zoning map available to the citizens of East Brandywine. There's also no map that shows who owns the roads in East Brandywine. I've kind of done that piecemeal using Google Maps, but there is no set of local layers available for GIS savvy people who want to browse township data. It's an expensive purchase. It's about $1,000 a month or over $1,000 a month. The modules we're interested in are so this is the separate standalone proposal you have. The Asset Central is the core module. It would be $900. And the permitting tracking system, which is the other element we're interested in, is an additional $300. So it's a budgeted item, but it is costly, and so I wanted to run it by the board to make sure that staff has authorization to make this purchase. Do you have any questions about the product, or?
So I guess my only concern is, and I was trying to jot through this real quick, we sign a 5-year contract with this?
Actually, he didn't anticipate that question. My apologies.
It does say year 4 and 5, so I would say yes.
So that's my only concern, being locked in. If it's a 5-year contract and we have it for a year or two and say this isn't fitting our needs, is there a trial basis so we can get out of this first, or?
Or is there a termination clause in the contract that would allow you to come out with proper notice?
Again, did not anticipate this line of questioning. I kind of came with a technical preparation rather than a financial and legal perspective.
Well, and we don't, I guess, if it's, we could always make a motion and base it off of a termination clause, and then if there is no termination clause, we can revisit this at the next meeting as well.
Okay, my preference in the wording of such a motion is that it has a termination to the satisfaction of legal,
Right.
Kristen's opinion.
Is there an actual contract that you have to enter? Like, I don't see it on this.
I think it's on the back of,
It's a letter agreement. You pass that down there.
Kristen. Thanks. Okay, I didn't see this.
I think the township staff has gone through, I don't want to call it training, but,
No termination.
and Lisa and Moran were the two that would be using the permit tracking the most, and they're very dissatisfied with what we have. I think they were satisfied with what they saw in Tracer. I understand the concern, but given what we currently have, anything is a vast improvement.
Do you prefer to hold off and see if we can get a termination clause?
Well, I guess I'd want to understand, what does the township, will they agree to do a certain number of years as a solid term? So for example, you're willing to do a 1-year term, or are you willing to do a 3-year term? Or do you want to always have the ability upon a certain number of days' notice to get out? I guess that's what I'd want to understand what you're.
I think what Kyle was suggesting, and I would agree with, is that we have some, I'll call it a honeymoon period, whether it's 6 months or some 120 days or 6 months, that if it doesn't appear to do what we think it's doing, that we have the right to get out of it at that point.
And I don't have a problem even paying while we're using it for that 6
Oh,
months.
absolutely,
You know what I mean?
absolutely,
I'm
yeah.
not-
Do we think 6 months would be a sufficient amount of time to know if we're liking it, if it's working? I mean, I don't know enough about the system.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
There are one-time costs associated with converting the table structure that comes with the system that we are depreciating over to the new table system. So, and that's billable on a cost structure that as needed.
Yeah, it says it's 8 to 12 weeks before you're going to have this one core application. Asset Sentry will be ready in 8 to 12 weeks. So I wouldn't want the 6 months. I'd want the 6 months to start after that Asset Sentry is fully operational.
Correct.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's an appropriate request to make that once that Asset Sentry is operational, you then have a period of 6 months, and at the end of the 6 months, if the township wants to terminate, you can provide notice and have the ability to terminate.
And then find out, I guess, in the conversation with them regarding that, if we can do a 2 or a 3-year contract instead of a 5-year. I think 5 years is very steep for anybody to be committing to something for such a long period of time.
And what's the board's preference on that, 2 years or 3 years?
I'm comfortable with 3 years. They have a discount structure. We're not really getting any benefit by going beyond the 3 years, so.
All right, and I'll second the 3-year with the said honeymoon period for the 6 months after the initial 10 to 12 week setup.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll reach out to McMahon right when I leave here.
Okay. Roadmaster's report.
I've got quite a few things to cover this morning. The first thing is that I'm proud to announce that we received a DEP Growing Greener grant for the stormwater improvements in Culbertson Run development. This grant is for $246,021. The work plan for the development includes tree removal, reestablishment of roadside swales, underground basins located within the Hawthorne Drive, repaving the road. We expect construction to start late spring, and a special thanks to Beth Ewer and Jerry Jamison of Cedarville Engineering. We've received a proposal from Cedarville Engineering for 2019 MPDS MS4 permit services. The proposal is similar to last year with the exception of additional mapping and inspections of the outfalls required by the DEP permit. In addition, they will review our BMP inventory and inspect them throughout the township. An inspection report with photographs will be provided. The report will include any deficiencies noted, and the total for the proposal is $79,944,000. As another note, there is within the budget $80,000 for this particular line item, and I respectfully request the board approve the 2019 MPDES MS4 proposal from Cedarville Engineering.
Do you want us to do that at this time?
If you want to move on that.
I'll make a motion, we approve the Cedarville Engineering proposal for the 2019 NDPDS MS4 permit services.
And Jason, I know you had some questions on this. Did you get those answered?
That was on the last proposal, so that was situated from before. So this is, I'm assuming this is new for the next project.
This is the ongoing MPDS permit to keep us, current with our permit. Every year, Cedarville pretty much handles that particular permit. So it sort of it's related to the Hawthorne Drive project as far as our pollutant reduction plan, but it's not exactly part of that project, of the Hawthorne Drive project. This is our overall permit to discharge stormwater to the waters of the Commonwealth, so it covers all of East Brandywine Township, not just Hawthorne Drive.
So under the permit, Jason, we have an obligation to go out and inspect and determine whether there are any deficiencies in the entire stormwater system. and that's what this is for.
Correct.
It's a regular requirement.
Yeah, it keeps our permit current and
I'm okay with it.
Okay. All right, I believe you made a motion.
I did.
And I'll second the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
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 My second item is we've received, actually third, but we've received quotes for 2 new Hustler zero-turn mowers. These mowers are on state contract. They have a 5-year warranty, which is pretty much unheard of for a zero-turn mower. The proposal is for Power Pro Equipment, 780 East Main Street in New Holland. And my crew and I have looked at many different machines, and these seem to be the most reliable at an affordable cost. Both mowers are Hustler supersede hyperdrive with a 36 horsepower Vanguard engine. One has a 60-inch deck, the second has a 72-inch deck. For the 60-inch deck is $11,666.13. And the 72-inch deck is $11,915.79, and there is $23,000 budget in the Public Works Capital Improvement Fund for these machines. Respectfully request the supervisors permit us to purchase these 2 machines.
And real quick, 2 things. One, are we selling equipment to, or have we already sold?
We're in the process of selling our 72-inch, it's a diesel laser X-Mark. We have another 60-inch laser, which is, I think it's about 5 years old, and we are going to keep that not only as a backup, but to, there's times when our 60-inch machine's out, and we could use a second one, so we're going to use that as a backup, and also to, mostly for maintenance around the township building.
Okay, all right, so I lied, so I have 3 questions. The next is, maybe you touched upon it, was it diesel or gas, these new ones?
The new ones are gas.
Okay, and then the last thing was, you had said 5-year warranty. Is it 5-year consumer or 5-year commercial? Because I know that sometimes they put the devil in the details and they offer it for residential, but not for commercial, so just,
Well, the proposal just says 5-year warranty. But I imagine since it's directed to the township.
yeah,
that
I would just,
it would be
it's,
commercial.
I mean, it is what it is, like you said, that's unheard of to have a 5-year warranty. That's why I
Right.
questioned it, because I know it's normally for residential. Okay, I don't have a problem with it.
I'll make a motion that we authorize the purchase of 2 Hustler Super Z Hyperdrive 36 horsepower mowers, one with a 60-inch deck and the other with a 72-inch deck. The 60-inch deck for $11,666.13, and the 72-inch deck for $11,915.79.
And I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Not much of a difference in price for,
Nobody
Thank you.
wants the 72s, that's why.
Lastly, I'd like to just talk about some accomplishments and some plans for accomplishments from 2018 and some plans, projects for 2019. Some accomplishments from 2018 is Lennar Electric installed new LED lights in the parking lot and also the lights that are attached to the building. This has improved safety in the parking lot, and since that time, we've not needed to replace a bulb, which has cut way down on our maintenance. I think everybody, when they come in here in the evening, can attest to how nice the LED lights are and the vast improvement on the, with the township building. Dilworth Road between Jeffries and Little Washington Road, we replaced a 48-inch corrugated metal pipe with reinforced concrete pipe, and then installed 2 concrete end walls. And there are numerous problems throughout the township with corrugated metal pipe. When we removed this, it actually came out and just pretty much fell into pieces. So there are other problems throughout the township with the corrugated metal pipe. Sealmaster assisted us with resurfacing the tennis courts at the community park. It was a 5-step process and took about 2 weeks to complete, not 2 weeks solid, but it was done over 2 weeks. A very interesting process, and something that, my guys seem to enjoy, something different than mowing grass or patching roads or whatever. We installed 6 benches, various locations in the park. The restoration of McCausland Hall continues when time permits. On Pancoast Lane, we poured in place a concrete end wall to replace a end wall there that was leaning and causing erosion around the pipe. We accepted 1.5 miles of roads within Hideaway development. Did branch chipping at 250 residential locations throughout the township and collected $1,650 in fees. And last year we collected 61 loads of leaves, which was about 262 tons of material, which wasn't heading to the landfill. For this year, we plan to have Zinn Road repaved from East Reeseville Road to Hatfield Road, and other roads on our paving project are Hopewell and East Fisherville Road. Culvert replacement on Zinn Road in the area of Hockley has been delayed due to a gas line in the area which needs to be relocated. We expect this project to resume around the end of March. PECO is in the process of obtaining a DEP permit due to the stream crossing there. Let's see, we expect to replace a small pipe on East Fisherville Road down near Cowan Township early in the spring. And then as part of the corrugated pipe problem, there's I think it's a 30 or 36 inch corrugated metal pipe on Kristen Circle right at the T that needs replaced. So we'll be replacing that with HDPE pipe. And we're preparing an RFP for engineering and design for the new maintenance garage located near the fuel pumps. We expect a 5-bay garage with an addition to the salt shed, and we anticipate construction to start sometime later this year.
Thank you.
It's going to be a busy year.
I'm glad to see Hopewell Road's on your list of projects for this year. Matt, I would like us to send a letter to PennDOT or go on the record with respect to Creek Road, because it is a mess. And I think, I recognize that whatever they do this year, if they do anything, is not going to totally alleviate the problem. But there are several spots along Creek Road between Dallin Forge and the 30 bypass where water pools there constantly. In the winter, it's a problem, and then the road surface is a mess along that entire stretch. So I think we should just point it out to them and ask them to, maybe we can get some kind of response from them.
Okay. Kristen, I guess this is you again.
Which one, Bondsville Mill Grant?
Weaver Track conditional,
Oh,
no, we already,
Bondsville Mill.
I'm sorry, Bondsville Mill. I saw HUD and then he left you all by yourself.
Good morning. Yeah, I unfortunately had an appointment at home. I'm here this morning to give an update on Bondsville Mill. We're currently focusing on getting a grant from the county, municipal open space grant, focused on the development of the garden area in front of the mill buildings. What's on the screen is a rendering that was done by Kai Peterson as to what the garden area will look like. The municipal grant will cover a window of 3 years. It can be spent over 3 years, but we're looking to spend the bulk of it this year. We've broken up this work into 4 phases, where phase 1 would be removal of the concrete pad and stripping of 24 inches of soil so that 36 inches of soil designed to support the plant growth can be placed. Phase 2 would be installation of the soil, the hardscape walkways, and the infrastructure to water the gardens and provide power to the area. We're looking to do that in 2019. Phase 3 would be the actual plant installation, and we've already had the horticultural committee, which has a great depth of experience in this area, meeting to design those gardens and to help develop the costs that will be presented to the county for the grant application. And phase 4 would be the parking area to the south side of the pad. I'm anticipating that if everything goes well, we'll have the gardens installed next spring, so that by the end of the next year it will be established. The parking area is something that's a little bit more flexible, that could be pushed off a year or two. The grant opportunity is $250,000, of which that would need to be matched by the township. So I'm here to talk to you about what we're doing. We'll be back in front of you again later this month asking for a resolution along those lines, and we will have a lot more details regarding the cost estimates and the scope of work. We've had Judy Thomas, who will be reviewing the application, out to visit the park, and along with the administrator who would be overseeing the grant. And they're both very enthusiastic. This is right down the alley of what they're looking to spend money on countywide, because they realize that this will be a park that is not just a draw for the public of our township, but it will be a draw countywide. So they are very enthusiastic about this from that perspective. So I just wanted to make you aware of what we're doing and delay the groundwork, and to ask if this is in the game plan where this could happen.
So I guess my first 2 questions are, you had said that I think 24 inches of dirt has to be removed under the concrete, or was it 36?
Well, we anticipate the concrete's going to be about a foot. They want 36 inches of soil that is amenable to the types of plants that they're going to be putting in there. If we can use some of that existing soil and remove only 12 inches, that would reduce the cost, and would reduce the cost of the soil that we have to bring in, because we're going to have to bring in a good volume of soil to replace what we take out. But if we can use what's there and mix it with soil that's brought in, that would reduce the cost of what we're doing.
All right, and then the next question pertaining to the dirt is, I'm sure DEP is going to be involved with this if we're doing any disruption near the stream bed, and then on top of that, bringing in dirt.
No, this is all going to be, the disruption is only going to be in the concrete pad area and beneath it. The DEP is not going to have any concerns.
What
there.
about the Chester County Conservation? One of them is going to have to be involved. You're so close to the stream bed that it would definitely have to be silt fented
We have a stone wall that marks the perimeter of the previous buildings, a knee-high stone wall. It is contained from the stream.
Okay.
There will be no runoff from that stream. As far as stockpiling of the crushed concrete that is pulled out of the concrete pad area, we would be using that as a sub-base for the parking area, the future parking area. So that material will be crushed and stored to the south of the concrete pad for future use. And we understand that we're going to have some runoff and sediment control in that area. And we talked to Luke and to Nate about that yesterday afternoon.
And you had suggested that you guys are looking at a $250,000 match grant. Is the match to be how is the timeline set for that match grant? Is it all up front? Is it in a set amount of years? Is it, as soon as the grant is issued, if it is issued, it's matched immediately?
I frankly don't have an answer to that. I know that the grant covers a period of 3 years. Having said that, the cost of the first 2 phases, and this is ballpark, we're working up the estimates now, but ballpark, we're looking at around $300,000. So we're going to be spending the bulk of that money in the first year, and then the plantings would go in 2019, and then looking forward and scheduling, depending on what the finances are, the parking lot would happen the following year.
All right, and then lastly, I'm kind of the mindset of finishing the work on the backside so that you're not crossing over the front side to get to it. Is that a concern? Meaning the building rehab. And I think there's a couple that are going to get demolished, and
Yeah, the building rehab will continue, but, and we're conscious of that, where there will be an area along the front of the buildings that is left for them to be able to operate their construction equipment to continue work on the buildings. The garden area is something that will really embellish the park. It will add a third major component of the park, and David Culp's concept is to plant native species, low-maintenance species, with the theme being sustainability. And that is another thing that the county is very enthusiastic about, is that this will be a tool to teach the community about sustainability and what they can do with their properties other than lawns and things like that. So to establish the garden is an important thing regarding the draw to the park, and we have a group of people in the horticultural community involved with the program now, very motivated, and a lot of energy being put into it now. I would like to see that continue. I would hate to lose these people.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we just got to figure out the details of the grant. I mean, it's an awful lot of money that we would need answers to regarding the matching, the time to match, if it's all up front, if it's spread out, and then a little bit better of a cost analysis on the total overall project for the gardens.
Yeah, we'll have a reasonably accurate cost estimate to you in the evening meeting this month. I anticipate that we would use the open space, fee in lieu of open space fund for this. And this is, I think, money well spent out of that. It's for the purpose of open space, and I frankly can't think of a whole lot of other things that can be done in the township with that money, and there's a sizable portion there. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't scrutinize and strongly consider what's being done here. I'm just saying that there are funds there for this purpose that would benefit the community.
And, sorry, last one. What is open space? What are their thoughts on this?
This is not the open space referendum money. This is the money that's been accumulated from developers, the fee in lieu of open space.
Got it. Okay.
And
It's for
my
the
understanding
parks and
is there's
stuff.
roughly
What do they,
$700,000.
did you run that through the parks?
Jason wants to know if you've run this through or by the parks.
No, we haven't.
So we have a separate committee, the Bondsville Mill Committee is separate from the Park and Rec Committee, so.
Yeah, no, I understand. I think, I thought we agreed that the buildings would be constructed and leave the pad, that purpose for moving material around and whatnot, and then circle back around to the pad to do the gardens and the final touches. Didn't we discuss that earlier last year or middle of last year?
You can't see the rendering that's in front of us on the screen, but they're allowing, there's a a pathway or almost like a roadway in front of the buildings. And I think that addresses Kyle's question about if you did the garden and then did demolition or other work, would they interfere? But it's clear in the rendering, and I think I've seen other diagrams, that there's sufficient space there to continue the work on the buildings. The garden would sort of be a standalone area that would not be impacted by future work.
And that roadway immediately in front of the buildings would serve as an additional point of access to the park for emergency situations, because I know Kyle was interested in seeing a second access point, so.
And you have an
that-
entrance off of Bondsville that you can drive in and out of right now with heavy equipment?
Yeah.
Is there a master plan that the committee has put together of the overall picture and the time frame for both the building renovations as well as the gardens and the parking lots?
The Route 2 master plan was put together in 2010, and the Route 2 master plan was for the park as a whole, including development of trails, renovation of the buildings, use of the concrete pad area. Everything that we're doing, including this, is consistent with what's in the Route 2 master plan. This garden is perhaps a little bit beyond what was anticipated. This was anticipated to be an area where there were block gardens and sitting areas, and the fact that we're able to bring in David Culp to do something substantial horticulturally and make that a major feature of the park is a small step beyond what was in the plan. The concept is still to use the space similar to what's proposed here. The timeline is basically what I laid out for the gardens.
Yeah, it might make sense, and again, take this for what it's worth, because I'm new to this as well, but maybe with Jason and Kyle maybe not having been involved in the 2010 master plan, it may be something that at a future meeting the committee can take a look at that, dust it off, bring it up to date to 2019 to incorporate your new plans for the garden and the timing of that, and then bring it back to the board to sort of explain the long-range plan. I think that would also help in terms of budgeting. I mean, you recognize that there is that pot of money, but where will that pot of money be going with respect to the overall project?
Right.
I think that would be
I-
helpful.
I do recall, I think it was last year or the year before, that parking lot was going to stay and be used for farmers markets and possibility of other things in the center. And then now it seems as though it's shifted to 100% gardens, so.
Oh, no, there will still be open spaces in there. There will be a space for events, weddings, for example, music events, craft festivals. There will be open spaces within the gardens for displays of
Grass areas?
rotating art.
Grass areas?
Yeah, small grass areas. And you can see there's a small grass area, not in the immediate foreground of the image, but there's a square-shaped grass area surrounded by plantings.
Then,
just a little
I
bit
guess
further
this
back.
is something that Matt and his crew would have to maintain.
Goes into it. That goes into the whole budget, the overall picture that you need to have.
There would be maintenance needed, but the horticultural community that is involved with the project now, they're countywide, they have deep roots, there's a lot of connections there, and there's going to be people coming in once or twice a year to volunteer their time to maintain the gardens. So I don't anticipate, other than basic infrastructure type stuff, that the township is going to have any need to put significant monies towards maintenance,
Like grass cutting.
like grass cutting. Yeah.
Okay.
In answer to your earlier question, I think you should anticipate that the way most of these grants function, when there's a 50% match, we end up fronting all of the money, and then at the conclusion of the project, we get reimbursed. So I think that was your question. And that's typically the way grants operate.
And with the county money, I think you also, not that this matters because you're intending to keep it as a park, but I think there's a declaration that has to get recorded. I know in any other open space money that's been given, there's a declaration of covenants that's recorded against the land that says it has to be used for the open space recreational purposes.
Right, and she understands that we may have some events there that the township charges fees for, but as long as that's ancillary toward, to the main purpose of the gardens, which is open space, that they don't have a real concern of that. If that was a central feature and purpose of this, then that would be an issue for them, but it won't be.
Okay.
I'd also like to point out that once these gardens are established, this horticultural community is going to start working on other areas in the park. So they'll be installing small gardens throughout the park, and at very little to no cost to the township. These are people that love what they do, and the plantings are going to be volunteer time. Even for these gardens, the plantings are going to be volunteer time.
That would be my other point. I think we talked about this before, that we have to be careful with any of the procurement laws, that to the extent you're going to be contracting services out, that we have to make sure we're following the second-class township code provisions with respect to services and materials and labor. So that's why I think the master plan is helpful, so you can sort of anticipate what contracts you'll be needing to enter. You said some will be volunteer, which obviously you don't have to worry about that, but
the concrete pad removal, for example, is going to require the bid process and prevailing wage.
right. And what about, and again, this is sort of your decision, but for a parking lot, that could be considered land development. I don't know if you're going to require a land development plan for your own property. And those are the types of things that, again, when you look at a master plan, and to your point about, are there any other conservation district requirements? Are there DEP requirements? Any other permits that might be needed? Do you need an erosion and sedimentation control plan?
Yeah,
or-
we're going to need an erosion sedimentation control plan. As far as impervious is concerned, this is going to be a net negative impervious, because we're removing a huge area of concrete and putting in a relatively small parking area. So that will not be an issue, but we will need sediment control, and we'll need to have a plan
And I
for
guess
that.
it falls under the same from MPDS, where are we going to be disrupting over the total course of the project more than an acre? And if so, will we need stormwater management?
No, Nate, we discussed that in some detail with Nate yesterday, and it will be just under an acre, so we will avoid that requirement.
I just think there needs to be documentation that's in the township file, so that somebody else who's being forced to comply with all these regulations doesn't come back and say, well, if it's good for me, why isn't it good for you, township? Just to have, an analysis done that Tony's looked at it and concurs that these permits are or are not necessary, so that, again, you've done what you would expect a private developer or a private property owner to do. So it
Right.
doesn't come back and say, well, why are you following different rules?
Nate is putting a good effort into developing the bid document for the concrete pad work, the estimates for the parking areas, including requirements for sediment control and the like. And when we come back to you in March, we will have details like that provided, so that you can see how it's laid out plan-wise, as well as reasonably accurate cost estimates.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Kristen?
Pardon my interruption, just as a matter of procedure, representatives of the Bonnesville Mill Committee will be back at your next regular session, and at that time, would be a resolution of support for the grant application. Among the grant applications will be a number of additional documentation items that you asked for. So just be prepared for this to be on your
How much
next
is-
agenda as well.
How much is already budgeted this year?
He said how much has been budgeted this year?
I want to say 80 or 90, wasn't it?
We have 148 budgeted this year. Of that 148,000, 40,000 has been earmarked towards removal of the concrete pad. So this project is going to be beyond that $40,000. So roughly, a little over $100,000 is earmarked for the building work and rental equipment and those types of items.
Okay.
Thank you, Luke.
Okay, Kristen.
So the last thing, the Weaver Track, as you know, they filed a conditional use application. They did go to the Planning Commission last evening, and I believe the Planning Commission gave them a recommendation for conditional use with some conditions that will get to the board. I'm sure there'll be a memorandum of some sort. But they have asked that we schedule the conditional use hearing for February 26, 2019. And because it's beyond 60 days from the date that they filed their application, they needed to grant the board the extension. So this is just recognition of the fact that they have granted that extension to the board. And this meeting will take place on February 26, 2019, and I have to just make sure I have the time written down right. Did we say 7 PM?
Yes, I believe so.
7 PM. So that's it.
Okay, we already did our ordinance.
Do we need a motion to accept the extension of time?
I don't think you do. I think they're granting you an extension, and then you're acknowledging that you'll hold the hearing on or before that date.
Public comment on agenda items. Seeing no one and seeing none, we'll move on.
So now you're no one.
Do you have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.